another one of our financial wellness webinars here. This is one I've been hoping to land on May 29th, 5/29 for a while, and so I'm excited we were able to do it this year. This webinar will be recorded, and we'll be going through a lot of slides. Those will also be available on our website under the Client Center. You'll also be able, when you go there, to see the other webinars we've done in the past. We've brought in experts on estate planning, end-of-life planning, cybersecurity, and many other topics like that. So you could find those recordings and those resources on our website as well under the Client Center. You'll also receive an email from us once this has been downloaded and then put on our website. So you should see that in the next couple of days. But once again, just thank everyone for joining us here today. Today, our experts are myself and Michael Guarini, one of the other advisors at our office. This is a topic we go over with a lot of our different clients that we work with on how to save for education, whether it be for themselves, their kids, their grandkids, what have you. So I think we can get a lot of value out of today's. So with that, I'll let Michael start the webinar for us, and we'll go from there. So thank you, Michael.
Okay, so let's start off with what is a 529 plan? A 529 plan is a tax advantage investment account designed to help people save for higher education expenses. And these can be sponsored by state agencies, educational institutions, and can be used for qualified expenses such as tuition, room and board, books, and other related costs. There's two main types of 529 plans: prepaid tuition plans, which are tuition plans which allow parents and others to prepay tuition at current rates for designated beneficiaries, and savings plans, which we're going to talk more about today. These are more flexible and allow savers to invest in a range of investment options, such as mutual funds, exchange-traded funds, and other financial instruments. Let's go over some benefits of the 529 plans. 529 plans offer tax-deferred investment earnings, can be used for qualified education expenses, tuition, room and board, books, etc. These allow for tax-free earnings. Definition of qualified education expenses was changed in 2019, and the updates include K through 12 tuition up to $10,000 a year, certain costs associated with apprenticeship programs and trade schools. And it also allows you to pay up to $10,000 lifetime towards student loan payments. In some states, like New York and Massachusetts, offer state tax deductions for 529 contributions to residents plans. Tax-free transfers of assets can be made between family members. So this allows you to exchange the 529 plan between sons, daughters, brothers, sisters, parents, grandparents, brother-in-law, sister-in-law, daughter-in-law, all the way up to first cousins. They also provide creditor protection for some state plans. In New Hampshire, 529 college plans are generally protected from creditors in the event of bankruptcy, other financial difficulties of the account owner. This creditor protection is provided under New Hampshire law, which recognizes 529 plans as exempt from the claims and creditors of the account owner. Specifically under New Hampshire revised statutes, amounts held in a 529 plan are exempt from the claims of creditors of the account owner, so as long as the contributions are made more than 120 days prior to the filing of bankruptcy. This also allows specific trades like surgeons from malpractice insurance to be protected from the creditors as well. This chart shows the hypothetical growth of a 529 plan versus a taxable account. So this shows over an 18-year period. So if the accounts were set up at the birth of a child, the first chart is going to show if you contributed $100 per month over the 18-year period. So over 18 years, $100 a month would account for around $33,000 in a taxable account versus $38,000 in a 529 plan. And then as the chart goes on, $200 per month would amount from $66,000 to $77,000. $300 a month shows from $99,000 all the way up to $116,000. And this is only showing an average rate of return of 6% per year. And it's using a 25% income tax rate on the taxable account. Examples assume taxes are paid annually out of the account, and the tax rates may vary based on the client in their current situation.
Yes, and that's why it's important to start. This is 18 years. It's important to start these early. Give it time in the market. And then thank you, Mike. So I will just go over some of the updates with FAFSA in particular. It's been in the news quite a bit for some issues coming back with people for what is their what are they going to receive for aid. But this is mostly to go over some of the just general updates. There's been some things that have helped increase the amount of aid that people are eligible for, and again, they balance it out. There's some other things that had to be updated that would decrease it. So that's why it does depend on everyone's situation. One of the big benefits that we've seen for our clients that they've updated and improved is having what happens when a grandparent owns a 529. And there's a slide that goes into better detail, but previously the question was always who should own it, the parents or the grandparents. And oftentimes it was actually the parents, because even though the parents owning it counted it towards the FAFSA calculations, it was roughly 5%. But if a grandparent owned it, it didn't show up in the FAFSA calculations right away. But as soon as the grandparent took money out and started paying it to the school wouldn't know who it was coming from. So it would count towards the student's income. And 50% of the student's income was used for that calculation. So you're talking about a 45% difference. Now they've updated even further and said if the grandparents own the 529, it does not count towards FAFSA. So now you're talking about a 50% difference in how that 50% benefit in that calculation. There are some other updates in here that have affected our clients. And as I said, these slides will be available later, but some I wanted to point out: pre-tax contributions. So things on your paycheck, including retirement plans, workers' compensation benefits, and other income sources are not reported against you. Child support is also moving from income. Those who receive child support can move it from an income to an asset, which I'll show in a later slide what that difference makes. On the offsetting side, those who are paying child support do not receive an offsetting reduction in their income benefit. They also, another change here that has affected some of our clients is it used to be you could be a little more clever about which parent was applying for FAFSA. And so oftentimes it was whichever parent had the lower income or assets because they're more likely to qualify. Now, whoever's providing the most financial support for students must apply using all their income and investments. Typically, the one providing the most financial support also tends to be the higher income earner. So it does have that impact. The other thing I want to make sure I mention in case people are reading these later, there's no income reduction for state taxes paid. This just means it's not included as a deduction when they're calculating your income for your state. There is still, as Mike said earlier, the ability to deduct from the state taxes when you contribute. So we'll have a handout or a link on our website that will show a map of the U.S. and what states offer such a deduction. But an example is, for instance, you have a lot of clients in Massachusetts and New York. Both times, if you contribute to a 529, you actually receive a state tax deduction for a portion of those contributions. So oftentimes we do have, in those cases, a parent making the contribution. So the parent gets that deduction. Why is it important to continue to save into a 529? The cost of college has grown by 30% over the last 6 years, right? About 5% a year. And this is on average. So those of us in New England have seen a higher increase per year. At that same time, the amount of financial aid has gone down, meaning that the difference has to come from loans or income or savings, like 529s. This is a slide I don't want to get too detailed in. It's got a lot of numbers and boxes and charts here, but what I was mentioning earlier, for parents, FAFSA expects a student to pay more towards their education, since it's their education, than they do for a parent's income and assets. So this is what I was talking about, though, when they were looking at those receiving child support, allowing that a number to move from income to assets. So they use a much smaller portion of it when they're calculating how much aid you should or should not get. This is also the bigger thing here. When previously, if a grandparent owned a 529, the money they sent to the college counted towards the student's income. Now it's a grandparent's 529. And so it doesn't affect it. So for many of our clients, particularly those in New Hampshire, there's no state tax deduction. We're having the grandparents start to own the 529s if they don't already. Another slide here. Michael and I were sadly joking about this earlier. These are national averages. So in New Hampshire, our in-state public tuition is more expensive, I believe, than they are showing here for private out-of-state colleges. But just, it gives you an idea of how much money do you need set aside to pay for college in general. And we're looking at $60,000 on the top end here for private nonprofit four-year schools. But even again, I believe in New England, we just had a few schools hit the $80,000 a year mark. So how are people paying for these? Well, it's either borrowing, and in this case, if people they borrowed on average 41% between the student and the parent. And then the rest is coming from the parent's incomes and savings, and 529s are bundled in here. And then students' incomes and savings. Some people have very generous relatives and friends. An example, in my family, I have an aunt who very smartly, every time a niece or nephew is born, opens a 529 for them. So everyone, if they want during birthdays or holidays, can give money directly to that 529. So that would make up this gap here. And then scholarships and grants, because he talks about this segment's going down. So for those who did not borrow, well, how'd they do it? Either high income or more likely high savings, right? They put the $300 a month into the 529, like Mike was showing previously. As I said, if you're putting money into 529, it doesn't just sit there in cash. In Mike's example, is growing by 6%. How to grow by 6%? It was invested, right? And so our example was a static 6. It's going to go up and down with the markets. Different 529 companies offer different options, but typically age-based is one, which is like a target date fund in a retirement account. Instead, this is an age-based. It's more aggressive for if your child is below a certain age, right? Their first 10 years before school can be very aggressive. They're within a year or two of going to school or already in school. It's very conservative, mostly bonds and money markets. You can also do static, right? Where you or our office will make more specific picks. And so some clients want to keep it very aggressive or keep it very conservative, regardless of the age of the child. And that can be done here as well by just picking individual funds. So you could pick an equity fund, bond fund, money markets. There are other types of retirement or other types of education accounts that many people have used in the past. So generally the 529 is what we recommend, and Congress has made a lot of changes to specifically make those the most beneficial. But many people still ask about these other options. We wanted to touch on those. So 529, the college savings plan, is what we were referring to earlier. There's also a uniform gift to minors or uniform transfer to minors, very similar. Was the way that up until 529s were popularized, people would give them money to the kids and be able to earmark it. And then there's a Coverdale education savings, and this was essentially a predecessor to 529s. Some of the big differences here, and as I said, Congress is really doing a lot to make 529s the most beneficial product, is a 529 in the Coverdale. The money is all tax deferred when it goes in there. So if it's growing from that previous slide Michael had, you don't pay any tax while it's in there growing. and you only pay tax if you take it out for non-qualified education expenses. So it could be tax-free growth if used properly in both a Coverdale and a 529. The UTMAs and UGMAs that people used to do, it runs into certain rules, like a kiddie tax, they call it, where a portion of this becomes taxable, and it can become taxable at a significant rate. More importantly for our clients, how much can you put in? So I apologize, the slide's a little bit deceiving, which Michael pointed out to me. A 529, the government allows people to put in up to 5 years worth of contributions at one time. But then you have to wait until the 5 years later in the sixth year to do this sort of thing again. But I've seen examples where a client sold a business, sold a property, they've had significant income that they wanted to gift, and this was a way they could do it without running into any sort of gift tax issues, and to get things out of their estate or defer the taxes. 529 is the only thing that lets you do that. UTMA, UGMA, you're limited to the annual, and a Coverdale, you can only do 2,000, right? So this is why these are phased out quite a bit. So as I said, a lot of these things these are slides are available, so I'm going to skip through them somewhat quickly. Just the other high level. Once you've given money through UGMA or UTMA, you can't change your mind. You can't change what child you're gifting to. And there's another section that shows that once they turn 18 or 21, depending on their state, the money's theirs, right? So if you've saved $100,000 in this account at 18 or 21, they have $100,000. 529 does allow you to control the money, change children, as Michael said. He had that whole long list of who you can change it to. And you can also choose just not to send the money out if it's not something you think would end up benefiting that child. Another thing that I have had clients ask me about, I know Michael has as well, but I've also had other advisors mention, they try to use Roth IRAs, or what they call variable universal life, VULs, as ways to save for education. Again, these are a little bit more outmoded ways it's done, particularly since Congress has made so many updates to 529s. But just something that people are aware of that's out there, because we like to call it the brother-in-law conversation. We'll mention, oh, we're using this. So a Roth IRA, the R in IRA is retirement. That is ultimately what Congress designed this for and what it's best for. But just like a 529, it can be tax deferred, or if used properly, tax-free growth. So that's one reason it's compared. The other thing is when people make the contributions, if you don't know, is your kid going to use all the money or any of the money in your 529? The issue you run into is it's stuck in the 529 unless you want to pay tax on the earnings and a penalty if it's for non-qualified education expenses. So some people who really just are not sure what they're going to do with that money, if their kid will use it, they put it in a Roth, well, then it's not stuck. Now you just have more money for retirement. So that's one thing that people utilize it for. You also, for a Roth, there are certain abilities to take out your contributions before 59 and a half. So there's some flexibility there to avoid tax penalty, even in pre-retirement before you're 59 and a half to pay. But that last line there is very important under eligibility and financial aid. If you take money out of your Roth, retirement accounts are not counted against you in the FAFSA calculation, that earlier slide which showed 5% for your assets. But if you take it out and pay for education, now it counts towards your income, which was 20%. So you're now making an impact on your FAFSA, and you're also reducing your ability to save for retirement.
James, just to make one comment on the last slide, you do have to have income to set up a Roth IRA for the child. The child has to have income.
That's true. Yes. So thank you, Mike, because there's two scenarios. Either it's the parents' Roths or it's the child's. Exactly. And the child has to have income to do that. So one other thing, we're still really unfortunately waiting on some clarity from the IRS, keeping an eye out for any of their bulletins. But one of the updates that they now have available is if you had a 529 or 15 years, you can roll up to 35,000 of it into a Roth IRA for your child. Now, as Mike mentioned earlier, the child still needs to have income. So if you see here, beneficiary annual job earnings must equal or exceed rollover amount. So if you're moving the annual limit of 7,000, your child has to have 7,000 worth of income. But this is a strategy that's often done after they've graduated. So at some point they will have income. But it is 35,000 per child. So what we're waiting clarity on from the IRS is if you change the beneficiary, as Michael said, you can go anywhere really on the family tree. Does that restart the 15-year clock? Or can you have a situation where if you have 2 or 3 kids and you have more than 35,000 in 529, can we distribute it among the 3 children as long as one 529 has existed for 15 years and do the conversions for each of those children? So that's something that the assumption is we will be able to, but the IRS has not clarified that. So we have been cautious about changing the ownership for clients until we get that update. Another thing, another product that I've seen used is a variable universal life policy. So this is another situation where someone may say, you know what, I'm concerned about locking money up in a 529 in case my kids don't use the funds. So I'd like to have something that has an additional benefit. So a variable universal life policy is a way to do that. It is primarily still a life insurance product, but oftentimes the death benefit, the insured will actually be the child because it makes it very inexpensive. And parents or grandparents will pump money into one of these. It can move with the market. The variable means it's invested in the markets. And then hopefully the account value has grown significantly and you can take tax-free loans from the policy to pay for insurance. So this is a very nuanced way of paying. So it is an important thing that I would not recommend anyone do this on their own. There should be a conversation with your advisor, but it is something that is people bring up. The catch again is it is primary life insurance product. So unlike a 529 or the other assets we talked about, this has an additional cost to pay for the life insurance. So it has to be a situation where you need the life insurance, you need the tax deferral, and you don't know if your children are going to need the money. You don't want trapped in a 529. One other thing that I'd alluded to earlier is the gifting ability for a 529. So when you're gifting to a 529, you control the funds insofar as you can change which child receives the money. You can take the money out. You can take the money back, with the exception of if you take it back, you do pay tax and penalties. But it's a flexible way of gifting money without giving up control. But it's out of your estate. So we've had a few clients who are going to be well over either their personal or their the federal or the state estate tax limits. Depending where you live, it's anywhere between $1 million and $13 million. But if you gift money to a 529, you have control, but it does not count towards your taxable estate. So one extreme example I saw with these, they're saying here, a couple can contribute up to 180,000. That's that 5-year rule times each grandparent. A client sold a significant asset, an apartment building, and then this client, their spouse, were able to gift to 3 of the grandchildren using this 180,000. So fully funded the children's education, but it also removed, it was not quite 180 at the time, the limits were lower, but it was about $450,000 they removed from their taxable estate. This is what I was referring to earlier. Right now, the federal exemption in most states mirror the federal is about 13 million per person or 27 million for families. So not many people fall in there, but for those clients who do, this is an important strategy. But more importantly, that limit is going down to 7 million per person, or 14 if Congress does nothing by the end of 25, which is likely for Congress to do nothing. So this is also a strategy we'll continue to talk about with clients if the state tax limits are not fixed next year. So this slide will be available for people to read through. And then these are the sources that we have available from this web, or from the slides we're presenting. But again, we'll have a few other things that we'll include. So you'll receive an email from us saying the recording is good to go and it's available. And if you go to our website, you'll be able to see this and other videos that we've done. And then here's just the other advisors here. Michael and myself are on this one, but there are a team of 5 of us. So if you have any questions on what we've gone over here, or if you're a grandparent and your kids have questions on what should they be doing, who should own it, again, please feel free to reach out to one of us, and we're happy to talk about your specific situation.